right, we are back on a Wednesday. Good to have everybody in. It has been a crazy week already. As we hit the middle of June, so much going on. The weather continues to be a bugaboo and eerie, but that's because it's eerie nonetheless. So what more would you expect? Rain, then warmth, then rain again. It's almost like wintertime, except if there's no snow, at least not yet. Good to have everybody in here on the Gem City Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by our friends at Rebage Investments, keeping financial guidance simple. If you want more info on Rebage, you can head over to the website, www.rebageinvestments.com, or you can simply call their phone number, 814-734-3433, 814-734-3433. And we will be having some exciting updates with Rebage Investments and our sponsorship moving forward in just a little bit of time on a future episode here shortly. Joining me for an episode tonight that is going to go 100 miles an hour, 1 mile an hour less than Shedeur Sanders was allegedly going in Cleveland this week is Nick Hartman. Nick, you like that?
I would say too soon, but I'm a big fan. No, things doing well tonight, man. No complaints. Better than Shedeur, that's for sure. But, the guy just can't, he was out of the news for a little bit. He had to find a way to get him back into the news cycle. So here we are.
So when all the experts talk about the speed that you see on tape for Shedeur, do you think that's what they meant?
Listen, he's a quarterback with some wheels. That's for sure.
Hey, you know what? I'll admit it, though. There are plenty of cars out there nowadays where you get up to 90, 95 miles an hour and you don't have a clue you're doing it. They make these cars so smooth nowadays. I think we should put a petition there to increase the speed limit because in my car is a 7-seater, and it doesn't. You wouldn't think from the outside and get up to speed fast. I hit 80 on 79. Oh, I don't even realize.
My kid, my oldest, he's 9, and he's now at the age where he is my car cop. So the minute I go 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, he goes, Dad, you're going too fast. Pull it down. And then my littlest is 4. He's like, go faster. So yeah,
I can see that conversation going very, very well in the car. I'm sure that's how a lot of arguments get started.
I tell him it's a guideline. It's a guideline.
I'll
change that tune when he's 16. But
one of the things that, and unfortunately for my sake is, when I took my driving test, one of the things that they always taught, which is a good thing, is defensive driving, right? Make sure that if you have the choice to drive fast or drive slow, stop at a yellow light or go through a yellow light, you tend to want to pick the safer of the two options. So they still teach it that way. It just doesn't necessarily mean that, people like myself follow that. And I'm guilty. I'm the first one to be guilty. But Shedeur makes me feel better in terms of the speed that I drive.
Listen, keep burying the Browns. I'm here for every single part of it.
You know what the hard thing too is in driving? I don't know if we're going off on a tangent to start the episode, but that's okay.
Welcome
you know what the other hard thing too when driving is, are you one of those guys who've used the Google Maps estimated time of arrival as a challenge?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's just like guy code. It's a recommended time. I see it more as a time to beat.
I was going to say, I feel like maybe Google Maps does it on purpose. If they were smart, they would actually work with the police and they would make it so that the ETA is just dropping rapidly to begin with. So that way you can feel good about yourself. But I don't know if I'm not more than, if I'm less than 5 to 7 minutes, depending on the drive, ahead of where I was, I find it pretty disappointing.
Listen, I will say this about Shedeur, though. It's impressive. He was going 101 in a 60-mile-an-hour zone. Granted, it was about 12:30 in the morning, so I'm hoping the road was a little empty. But yeah, I think he can afford that $250 fine.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. I don't think the roads in Cleveland are very populated at 12:30. They're really not populated on Sundays at 1 o'clock in the fall either, but we'll leave that story for another day. Maybe they will be if Shedeur ends up being the starting quarterback because, you can't teach that speed. All right, let's get into it. Hopefully you didn't get a parking ticket or a speeding ticket this week either. Thanks again for being with us. Follow us at Gem City SN up in the box. You can see we're on X, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube. Rebus Investments, our sponsor. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you eat your podcast. Busy show tonight. We're going to have Marcus Mosher from the 33rd team joining us in a few minutes. He's going to talk Steelers, Bills, Browns observations so far. He's done some hits with ESPN, really embedded in the NFL landscape. And, of course, he's from the Erie, PA area as well. So joining us in a couple of minutes. But we'll start, Nick Artman, with the Erie SeaWolves, and we'll bring our guest on in a moment who does a great job with covering the minor leagues around Detroit. But did you happen to see the offensive onslaught again today, Nick?
If you missed it, I mean, I get it. Rain delay and then shortened 7 innings, but oh my gosh, the bats, it didn't matter. Keep the rain coming. The bats were still hot. There was no cooling them down today against Chesapeake.
14-0 win against Chesapeake. They've won 2 straight against the Bay Sox to start the series. Chris Myers hit 2 home runs in the game. And oh, by the way, it is the 8th time the Seawolves have scored 10 runs or more in a game. They've now scored 360 in total in the regular season. That is far and above more than any other team in the Eastern League. Yet, at 43-22, they are still not a shoo-in for the first half Southwest Division title because Akron, hot on their heels, they win tonight, and it's just a half game difference. So to break it all down for us, welcoming back a guy that I had on my TV show a few times, and there is, in my opinion, nobody in America who does minor league baseball coverage better than Tigers Minor League Report, and the man who is a big part of that, Roger Castillo, joining us on the show tonight. Roger, it's good to see you back again. And I'm digging the hat, man. Take us through what that hat is, and I like the color scheme, and I'm curious.
So this is the Havana Sugar Kings, and they were the Cincinnati Reds AAA affiliate from, I think, 1948 to 1959 until Fidel Castro took over and decided that no more Major League Baseball in Cuba. So essentially, they were, when the International League, the old AAA actually was quote unquote international, because there's a team, the Maple Leafs, Toronto was a team at the time as well. This was the Cuban affiliate. So they supplied a lot of the Reds players and everything. And the AAA structure, not what it was then, but I've always been a big fan of this hat. The Marlins have done a tribute to this because, of course, the Cuban connection. So I have about 13 SeaWolves hats, but I can't, sometimes I want to keep it neutral and come on. So with West Michigan just clinching the playoffs berth, and now the Flying Tigers did today too. So
yeah. Have to ask you, because we talked about this a few weeks ago, if you had the ability to rebrand Erie, because that might be a thing, whether it be for a night or for a few days or for a season. Did you think about at all what team name that you would give Erie based on your experience?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you're talking about like downtown Erie, I mean, you can call them the Wanderers or the the Bums, maybe, depends on your experience with Erie. I mean, I'm not this and that, but in all theory, if you talk about the Isle and everything like that, the island, I know they're not technically on an island, but I thought it'd be kind of cool to call them the Islanders or something like that to nod to where they are on Lake Erie. So, but I was like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make a lot of sense because they're not an island, but it depends on your point of view on it.
Well, I mean, look, we're not part of a sea. That was already brought up. We're part of water. Yeah, whatever. It's not the same, but it is the same, right? That'd be funny. Two Islander connections for Erie maybe in the next few months if Roger gets his way. Matthew Schaefer and the Seawolves themselves. All right, let's talk Seawolves first. I think this is an appropriate spot to start, Roger, because you had a chance for a couple of seasons to see Andrew Graham do his thing in West Michigan. We, of course, saw him in Erie in 2018. He has since been a very stapled focal point of this Tigers minor league organization, and he gets the call up this year to Erie after Abe Alvarez moves to Toledo. Is there any surprise at how well this team has been doing? Obviously, the players and the talent that they have on this unit are a big part. But when Andrew Graham came to Erie, what did you expect from the Seawolves in the first half, and what have they done based on your expectations of what you thought might happen?
I know that this is a very veteran squad, like you were discussing. This is a team that's been together now for 3 years, which is rather uncommon. You don't see that very often in AA affiliates. And I thought the fact that they were, with the rotation taking you've seen Jake Miller, who's been out now for a month and a half now. You've seen the Joseph Montavo also out with an injury. Eventually, Troy Melton, when AJ Hinch was talking about Troy Melton back in April and during spring training, it was just a matter of time before he was going to get up to Toledo. And so, as you know, and then as predicted, it happened. And so I will say that they've done a hell of a job with getting the production they're getting, because their bullpen has been outstanding. And it's like a patch, like the bullpens of the past, just a patchwork of guys. And Dylan Smith, that really was like him moving the bullpen was a big thing for him. He started gaining velocity, and but then pickups like Drew Summers, like who the heck is Drew Summers? Besides being one of the biggest guys they've ever had in a jersey, and then the surprises of like Jordan Marks, who's put together pretty well. Richard Gurash, the Cuban independent who they signed from the Mexican League, they're just getting it done. And I think that the biggest thing for the SeaWolves this year that I really enjoy, the fact that Roberto Campos, who I talked to a couple weeks ago, he's kind of cooled off a little bit, but first year in the level, he's adjusting pretty well. And then, you have Tyron doing his thing. He had 2 home runs. He had, I believe, he went 4 for 4 today. They are starting to come together at the right time, even with the just hitting home runs. And it's a good thing to watch, because the versatility of the positions, they don't have a set, a quote unquote set third baseman, but here we are. And with McGonigal and Clark coming on, hopefully after the end of the first half, kudos to Graham, because he just knows what he's doing. And a lot of these guys have played for him before in Lakeland too. So at West Michigan as well. So that comfortability is why the Tigers felt so comfortable putting him there.
Yeah. You mentioned the pitching staff too, and I think it is funny how it's been like a hodgepodge. That was the one thing I think we were worried about. Isaac and I talked about it on this show at the start of the season, was the pitching. They lost a lot of pitching with call-ups to Toledo and things like that. And, the hodgepodge approach is good. I might have to find a way to make that stick. But there's a guy, that just got caught up recently. Actually, Kenny Serwa had a crazy 2025 so far. Signs with the Tigers in January. Gets assigned to the E-Wolves, but then he gets called up to the Tigers, back down to West Michigan, and now he's back up in Erie. And the talk of the town is that knuckleball and how it's hard to hit. And he had a great game. What was it, last night or the night before? Tell me about this guy. I want to know more about this guy as somebody who looks at the Tiger system as a whole. I mean, is this somebody we should keep an eye on, or is it just like is it a Tim Wakefield knuckleball, or is it like a one-trick pony?
I think it's a little more than Tim Wakefield, because he has some really good velocity to it. And I think there was another way he threw it last night that I was like, Chris and I were talking about this yesterday on text. We're like, well, what was that? And the fact that the fluttering action, to me, one thing about him that when we first saw him get signed it was an example of the Tigers will go anywhere for pitching. Like we were talking about Richard Gurash, the Cuban, earlier. Kenny Swerve down in West Michigan, it didn't take him that long. It was just going to be a matter of time before he was going to be in Erie. Just a matter of like he got put in professional ball in high A for the first time, and he handled that just well. And I think what stands out to me here so far is he's not intimidated by the hitting here either. And I think that when the knuckleball is on, it's one of those pitches that if you don't have it on, you're screwed. Yeah. And it's not like I look at like, R.A. Dickey as an example of like the guy in the last modern knuckleballer, if you will. There hasn't been one since at least in my opinion, that's come up and be effective. But I think Kenny is in a position right now to help the SeaWolves, A, clinch that first half playoff spot, but B, more importantly, I think gives them a stable arm in the rotation right now, because like we mentioned earlier, the injuries to the rotation, we don't know. Jake Miller, we don't know when he's going to be back. And that's a big blow to the rotation. I really think so. And Jaden Ham he did have 14 run support today, but today was his longest outing, and he's still adjusting there was going to be an adjustment for Ham. So if Soro can go in there and do his thing and just give him 5 innings each time and keep him competitive, I think he's going to be a big part of the second half of the SeaWolves.
Yeah.
And they need that pitching depth, as you talked about, Roger. And we know, of course, the second half, if Erie, especially if they don't end up getting into the postseason, if something goes awry in this Chesapeake series, Now you're sitting with a totally different roster. And again, when you look at the standings, the crazy thing about this year is that Erie, the last 2 years, they needed 38 wins to win the first half of the regular season. Last year, they needed 37 the year before that. You're sitting at 43, and you might need to get to 46, or you might need to sweep and get to 47 if you want to win the first half of the season, because Akron, based on what we're looking at now in their game tonight, is going to be at 42-22. So that's going to be a half game difference again. And Akron all set winning 5 straight games. But speaking, Roger, of the new roster of what it could look like after the first half, we know that's when the majority of the moves happen, right? Whether it's that or trade deadline or the 2 days that are really the big moving days. We expect Max Clark, Kevin McGonigal, you certainly do, I think, as well, to be in Erie at some point in the near future. And I want to start with the guy that everyone has been extremely hot on, and I think with good reason, because he's arguably been the best player in the Tigers minor league system in Kevin McGonigal. What about this guy has allowed him to take off in such a way this season, and what could we see him do in Erie? Give us the lowdown on Kevin and just what he's been able to do in the lower ranks so far.
McGonigal has probably one of the best eyes I've seen. Chris and I have talked about him being similar to Cole Keith. I think he's better than Cole Keith in the sense of we were pretty early on putting Cole Keith number 1 in our system, but McGonigal since day one. I mean, when he was down in Lakeland last year, it was at one point he was just like was playing with like the pitchers. He didn't really need to be there in the first place. He has that kind of eye at the plate. It's even as far as like playing third, he can play third if need be, but I think he's better to shoot at short or second. But it's just his ability to hit it anywhere. I mean, we Friday when they clinched and he scored 20 runs, he had 5 hits. It was his first 5-hit game. And the last hit being, yes, it was against a backup catcher. So what? It doesn't matter. He can put the ball anywhere he wants. The only thing that worries us is that his health. I mean, he had the ham bone or the injury on your wrist.
Yeah.
And so then diving back on, he had a ankle issue, but when he's healthy, I mean, there's this Chase Utley kind of comp to him, hits with power because he can hit with power. It doesn't look that way based off his size, but since day one, guys, he's been a guy who he just goes out there and can just put I don't even know how to say it, like just everything's a rocket off of him. It really is. And the fact that like here he is, that you can play second or short and has that position versatility, which the Tigers love. As you know, the Tigers want guys to play. We'll put it to you this way. Hinch has been about him since last year. And it's always about McGonigal. When is McGonigal going to come up? And the Tigers have been very rigid about making sure guys go to Erie, and go to Toledo, and go to Detroit. But, Sweeney's struggling, and he goes up and hits all worlds in Erie, and he does what he did in West Michigan for Erie. Is it possible that he can skip Toledo? I don't know if he can skip Toledo, but I will say this, guys. McGonigal is one of the best pure hitters I've seen the Tigers have. Like the Tigers have right now, and Max Anderson too. Let's not forget Max Anderson, who's come out aboard here and done a really good job in the infield. The Tigers have 2 dynamic infielders right now that are hitting. And in the last 25, 30 years, since I was a kid, I've never seen the Tigers have this kind of infield depth. 2 guys that can hit over 300. Anderson's hitting 350. I mean,
yeah.
You have Anderson and him in the second half of the season. Good grief. That's a lot to help out the SeaWolves this year.
Well, I think the other thing, Roger, too, that's intriguing to me, you talk about the power and the success that players in the Tigers organization have had in the last few years. I think what we really have to look into is the left-handed power that this organization has had, right? It started with Riley Green a few years back, and now we have seen it went from Riley Green, then it became Kerry Carpenter, who had a breakout season a couple of years back. Now we know what he's doing in Detroit. It went from him to Colt Keith and what he's been able to do, and now Kevin McGonigal. You mentioned Max Clark. The left-handed power in this organization, to me, is the scariest thing, because as you know, Major League Baseball, you can't have enough left-handed hitters to be able to help put out through your lineup. And to me, that's something that, goodness, if McGonigal can come up to Erie, to your point, Roger, he may not stay in Erie the entire rest of the season. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But it's going to be somebody who will certainly help Erie win. But to your point, I think he's in a fast-track situation, maybe like a Cole Keith, and I think that's a good comp just in terms of the trajectory that he's on and the versatility that both of those guys have.
Yeah, and the one thing about McGonigal, too, that I really like is the fact that he is kind of like, I hate saying this term, but it's like he's a baseball rat. He really consumes. Him and Max Clark both are students of the game, and they really they're nerds like us. Like what I mean by that is that everything's about baseball, all about just going out there. And I mean he's from Pennsylvania, so that's a huge thing for people locally too as well. I think that the fact that the Tigers also, if you notice, it was something that it was the Dayton the Dayton broadcaster said a couple of weeks ago. He said the Tigers have drafted college guys and what have you, and all through this time, but he said he's never seen the Tigers this good in the minor league system. And he said, he even said, he wasn't holding back. He said, they drafted these guys from college and big schools, and they didn't do nothing. And here they are drafting high school talent, and we're actually seeing that work. And it's a strategy and a change that I think Tiger fans are not used to either, because there's always we always get that on Twitter. Call him up. Yeah, I know. People know McGonigal belongs in Erie, if not higher. We know that, but the Tigers have a process. I'm not going to question it because it works. I mean, it has been working. If you look at the core of the 2024 playoff team last year for the Tigers, there's 6 or 7 guys from Erie. When Isaac, when have you guys? I mean, same thing, Nick. When have you remembered 6 or 7 guys from one Erie SeaWolves roster on a Tigers roster?
Well, here's the thing. The thing that's crazy to me is that we have seen similar players on a roster. We have not seen similar players with as much talent on the roster. I think if you were 6 or 7 years ago, Trey Cruz would have been in Detroit 2 years ago. Max Anderson would be sitting in Toledo. Heck, Justice Bigby had arguably the greatest single-season postseason performance in Erie history a couple of years back, and now he's back down with the SeaWolves. So I think to your point, Roger, and Nick, I'm sure you've seen this too, is that it's a blessing and a curse, and we're going to get to the trade deadline potential in a second because there's a million names that we could throw out there that will be trade fodder for other teams that are struggling. But I think, Nick, when you look at this team and you look at this organization, there's such a backlog of talent. Where do you put these guys? Yeah. You can only have 9 guys on the field in Toledo, and we know that for the most part, Detroit likes to call guys up quicker from Toledo than they would from Erie. I mean, and again, you see what the organization in Detroit's doing, and you can make the argument the Tigers need to get better in the trade market. It's amazing to me, to your point, Roger, and Nick, if you want to attest to this too, that this team looks so similar, not by choice, but because they're forced to. Because where else do you call these guys up and put them?
Well, and I think that's a testament to the way that system is, because, I mean, it's not like, yes, they have what was the start of the season, Roger, you'll know more than I will. It was number 4th in the league, rated 4th best minor league system in the league or something like that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, MLB Pipeline had them at number 1, yeah.
Yeah, so, but what are you going to do? I mean, they're sitting on top of the AL Central. Cleveland's 9.5 game back, so you could say they're going to be buyers because you want to try and make a title run, but they have a great team, and then, yeah, they got the assets sitting in all 3 levels of the minor leagues that I don't even know what you do with the trade deadline if you are buyers or sellers, because you got a great team, you got a great farm system, you can have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that I think that will be interesting for Scott Harris is how is he going to approach this trade deadline, because he has not been a buyer; they've been sellers, and so what are you going to do? They're going to, first and foremost, they're going to look within. Alex Lang threw last night for West Michigan on rehab. And I think they're going to try to do everything they can to address those swing and miss stuff that they miss in the bullpen. Because as much as the Tigers are 20 games over 500 and Cleveland's a 9.5 back, and the Twins are struggling, I still think there's flaws in this team. You cannot ignore that. And so what the Tigers have with their farm system is something they have never. I will say this with 100% confidence: they've never had this, which is depth. So if they traded Max Anderson, let's say, for a couple for a couple guys who can come up in major league regulars, they can do that without them hurting their system. Because when Dabrowski made trades before in the past, the Tigers after that were just pretty much fleeced.
Sure.
And they just didn't have anybody they could go with. And so during the Avila era was just always trading during the trade deadline, just get rid of salary. Now Harris has an opportunity. This is where Scott Harris cannot hopefully avoids the same fate that Baltimore and Mike Ellis has right now.
Yeah. Baltimore
was like, hey, we have all these prospects. We're doing great. Blah, 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 blah. Doesn't matter. You do look what the Braves did in the 90s. Remember, if you guys recall, the Braves traded their prospects to keep themselves relevant every single year.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and to your point, go ahead, Nick.
No. I was just going to switch gears for a second because I know we only got a couple minutes, and I'd love to get your perspective on this too. I mean, we are, they take down Chesapeake today. I mean, handedly. The offense is performing so well. They're still plus 160 in the run differential. Maybe they do lose a guy like Max Anderson, or we'll see what happens when we get closer to the trade deadline. But let's look at this week. We have the magic number is now 4 after the win at Chesapeake today to see about that, to stay in first place and to get that playoff berth. So what needs to go right over the next week to clinch that playoff berth?
They just need Akron to stop being a pain in the ass. I mean, really, it's like, honestly, I
That's
look
a
at
perfect answer.
It's honestly because I look at Akron, and Akron's got some guys. Don't get me wrong, like Travis Banana, the draft pick, Bazana, who is I think injured right now, who's been injured quite a bit. But the rest of the roster, like, who are these guys? And he will not go away. I don't get it. I don't get it. But you look at they scored 18 runs at Chesapeake Bay last month. So to me, just keep winning, keep doing what you're doing. You're at home. Your bullpen ERA is under like 2, I think, or something like that. They have a really ridiculous bullpen ERA.
Yeah.
Just let the bullpen cook, do their thing, and I think they'll be fine. I think Chris Myers was a good sign today, hitting 2 home runs. He really needed that. Like today, coming in today, only had 1, and so that's a good sign for things to come. The warm weather definitely is going to help out guys. If they could just continue to do what they're doing and just look, the Bay Sox are not going anywhere. Portland needs to do us a solid and or let the SeaWolves salad and lose.
I'd rather
win. Win.
Yep, I'd rather face Chesapeake this week than Portland. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look right now where things stand. Akron's up in the 8th inning. Like I said, it may take a sweep to be able to get to the playoffs, but I don't think that's out of the question for Erie because I do think, as we know, it's obviously a 2-horse race, but it's been a 2-horse race since the start of the season. So I think that's pretty evident. One more question left with Roger Castillo. By the way, you can follow him at Rogcast Baseball. You can also follow Tigers Minor League Report on social media. They're a great follow. They've got all the insight into both Erie, West Michigan, Lakeland, and Toledo, and everything you need to know with the minor leagues. The last question I wanted to ask, maybe because it's the biggest question that people who are in the weeds like us ask, is the other man that's a left-handed hitter that was 1-3 2 years ago in the draft, Roger, and Max Clark, and the guy who we think will also be in Erie in short order here. There are a lot of people that have talked about the struggles that he has had, and maybe they think, okay, this is not the guy who should be number 1 in our prospect pipeline. And I know you have an article that it's going to be coming out soon, kind of an excerpt as to your thoughts and your opinions on Max Clark. As he inevitably gets ready for Erie here, Roger, can you get a preview of the article for us? And from your lens and your perspective, where you think Max Clark is at this current moment in time mid-season?
I think he's a guy who last year went back and he worked on his swing a little bit to get more loft. And so when he snaps, he gets more of that pop into his swing. And he's a guy who, like I mentioned earlier with McGonigal, is a total rat in baseball. And I think that because he hasn't hit for power, that's where people are like, but he's been very selective at the plate. I mean, you look at his numbers where in terms of like, just as far as like first making, swinging strikes and everything, he has a really good approach to the plate. He's a little bit too picky. A lot of his contact's been on the ground or on the line. I think it's a profile that gears towards speed and hitting the gaps than home runs. And I think the home runs are going to come. I mean, you look at guys who, Corbin Carroll comes to mind as a guy who didn't really hit for a lot of home runs in the minors and then ended up hitting up here. So, I mean, his average exit velocities have been around league average for A ball. But I think the fact that he can go to all fields, I think it's a good sign. I think he's not, I think people are making a big deal about some of his struggles at the plate, but in all reality, he does the little things. He will get the guy, if there's a runner on base, he's going to make sure that he's going to get that guy over to score the run or whatever the case is. And so I think this arm strength is something that people talk about him having like a big arm. I think his arm's fine. I think he can end up being in left field too, but defensively he's fine in center too as well. And so I think people expected, because of, I think Wyatt Langford making the major leagues, I think didn't help, but I think Clark, for being his age, is developing just fine. I think we just want to see where you want to see that where we was hitting like dominating the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks of the season in high A again. But I think he's going to be fine in Erie. Once he gets up here, I think there's going to be a slight adjustment, but I think he's going to see more balls that he likes because he's facing better competition.
And the nice thing about it in this situation is I know they want him to hit for more power when he gets to Detroit, but he will not need to bring the power in Erie because he's going to have a lineup, even with likely a couple of departing players, that is still capable of putting up 300-plus runs in the second half of the season as well. Because as we mentioned through the whole conversation, it's been inevitable. This is a very stacked organization in terms of prospects for Detroit. Roger Castillo, man, it's great to see you as always. We could talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Are you coming to Erie at any point to see a couple SeaWolves games?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to be coming this weekend to hopefully watch the clincher. So I told Roberto Campos that I would make him empanadas, and I will hold them to that, because he doesn't. There's not a lot of apparently Cuban cooking in Erie, so I don't think Erie is a cooking capital, if you will, but Cuban capital, if you will. But either way, I'll be there Friday and Saturday.
Well, if you have any leftovers, let us know, and we'll stop by the ballpark.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I literally my wife is mad because she's like, "Are you gonna make empanadas and gonna be over promising?" And then I'm like, you know, I'm gonna do that. But like Greg Gingas told me I can use their kitchen, so I will, get cracking.
Listen,
we're ready.
You get Greg going. You got a theme night coming up here in Erie, buddy.
Oh yeah, no, trust me. That's the idea, is just to go listen. Like Tiger Mining Report, we're bringing empanadas. We're bringing it's like I said. Hopefully, Chris can one of these weekends come out here, and it's been a long time since Chris has been out with me to Erie. So either way, I'm looking forward to, if you guys are at the ballpark this weekend, hopefully we'll stop and have a chat.
For sure. I smell a food collaboration coming at some point with this network and Tigers minor league report. Let's go. Roger, hey, man, hope to see you out this weekend. Great stuff, and we'll talk to you again soon on this show, my friend.
Thank you, gentlemen.
See you, buddy.
All right, that is Roger Castillo of Tigers minor league report. Just such a great job he does with everything in the Tigers organization, and it's just this wild, Nick. 42 wins for Erie when you look at the way the standings are shaping up, and that still may not be enough after they had 38 to win the first half and 37 to win 2 years ago. 43 now wins, of course, for the SeaWolves after their win today. But yeah, as Roger mentioned, I have not been alive in this area in a time where we have seen such depth with Erie. And I think to an extent, Nick, maybe this is just my interpretation of someone who doesn't, who did play but doesn't play at this level. It probably eases the pressure a little bit for some of these guys. And I think when you get a Max Clark who comes up to Erie, or Kevin McGonigal who's been lighting the world on fire, but still it's another level and another challenge with different pitching. You come into a clubhouse, and while you're trying to get to Detroit for your own personal gain, you don't feel like you have to be the guy to stand out, because there are so many guys that have stood out and continue to stand out on this team.
No, 100%. It takes the pressure off, right? You don't have to be the guy that everybody's watching, because you are – the one and maybe best prospect they have in any system. I mean, it's like when Skeens came to the Pirates, it was like, okay, he's in Double-A. When's he getting called up? Okay, he got called up. All right, when's he coming to the majors? Now he could live up to the hype, but not many guys are Paul Skeens.
Well, and speaking of Paul Skeens, he is going to go tomorrow for the Pirates and Tigers doubleheader, along with Tarek Skubal. The two of them will not be pitching allegedly in the same game, which makes literally zero sense. But it is the Pirates, so
not much.
We just can't have nice things. I don't know. I was in Pittsburgh this past weekend visiting a friend. The ballpark looked beautiful. It was a wonderful walk downtown. Didn't see the Bucco bricks. I wonder where those went. I must have missed something. But, it'd be nice to get to see that ballpark full again for the playoffs. I digress anyway. All right, let's talk football in just a second. Before we get to football, of course, I want to talk about Revich Investments. They are our proud sponsor, and we're proud to be partnered with them for everything at the Gem City Sports Podcast Network. They keep financial guidance simple. If you want more information, head over to the website, www.revicinvestments.com, or you can call their phone number, 814-734-3433. We are excited now to bring in a local native and a guy who has done well for himself in the NFL industry. He's a host of a host of podcasts, including Locked On Cowboys, Locked On Dynasty. He writes at the 33rd Team Football Network, and he knows Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Buffalo better than we do. And maybe that's a good thing, and maybe that's a bad thing. Marcus Mosher joining us now on the Gem City Sports Podcast Network. Marcus, thanks for taking a few minutes to join us tonight.
Of course, I'm not happy about the Erie shots with our cooking. I think Erie's got a pretty good food culture here. So just listen, be nice to Erie.
I'm telling you what, the deli sandwiches that we have here, that's what I always go to first.
Yes.
That is number one to me in the whole country. Now, other things, whatever. We've got some good seafood. I don't know. Did you have a favorite spot to eat, Marcus? I know you know the area pretty well.
Oh man, to narrow it down to just one would be hard. But listen, I'm a sucker for a good pepperoni ball. So Stagnelli's, listen, you can send me free pepperoni balls whenever you want. I eat them all the time.
Dude, did you see their newest invention?
No, I did not.
It's the pepperoni ball sandwich. They take the pepperoni ball
I'm
bread, turn it into a hoagie. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's probably like 5,000 calories in a sandwich, but let's go.
You said pepperoni ball sandwich. I mean, you didn't even need to explain it.
Wait, where is this at? Where is this at?
It's a Stagnelli's. Yeah, Stagnelli's.
Is it really?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I'm telling you. Google it. Listen, the three of us, we'll go get a sandwich, talk some ball.
We're gonna go to the SeaWolves on Friday, stop at Stagnelli's for some pepperoni balls, and then we're gonna chow down on some empanadas when Roger comes to the stadium on Friday. I'm all for it. Marcus, I don't know where to start when it comes to the Steelers, Bills, and Browns, Knicks. So let's go ahead and start with the team that we kind of made some fun of, I guess, at the beginning of the show with Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland, because my goodness, I don't know where you begin when it comes to the quarterback battle. When you look at what Cleveland is doing, Marcus, and I know you don't want to put too much into the repetitions, right? Joe Flacco is probably going to get the majority of the reps in minicamp. Kenny Pickett will likely be second just because of the seniority. How do you envision this quarterback battle playing out? I don't personally see Cleveland keeping four quarterbacks. Do they? What do they do with the practice squad? How do you see this playing out with two rookies and a longtime veteran in Kenny Pickett on the squad?
Yeah, there's no chance they're carrying four quarterbacks because it just doesn't make roster sense to do so. So they're going to move on from one of the veterans, whether that's Flacco or Kenny Pickett. I honestly don't see it being Joe Flacco. I think he probably is the week one starter. It seems like the teammates really like him. He's got familiarity with that coaching staff. So I think it's going to be Flacco. But the real question is, who's the number two quarterback? Who is the guy that Cleveland anticipates starting some games this year? Is it Dylan Gabriel, who they drafted in the third round? Is it Shedeur Sanders? My bet is that it's Shedeur. I just think he's the more talented of the two quarterbacks. If you listen to some of the OTA reports, the minicamp reports, it seems like he's been the more accurate of the two quarterbacks. I actually don't hate the strategy of Cleveland just throwing out a bunch of quarterbacks and seeing what sticks, because when you don't have a franchise quarterback, you've got to explore every avenue possible to try to find one. It's better than sitting back and doing nothing. So I actually applaud Cleveland kind of throwing this strategy out there. We'll see if it works.
Yeah, I mean, it's like law of averages, right? Sooner or later, somebody's got to pan out. And they're all decent quarterbacks. I mean, even Dylan Gabriel has shown flashes in camp this year, too. I think you're right. I agree. I said the same thing. I think Flacco comes out as the starter there. Shedeur, if he can play as well as he can drive, maybe we'll see some things.
Well, and here's the thing with Shedeur. It's tough is I could see him being the week one starter because he's got that kind of talent. But when you're a fifth round pick, you're not even guaranteed to make the roster. We see fifth round picks every year get released before week one. And we saw in the draft, like there just wasn't a lot of interest in Shedeur Sanders. There's just a lot of teams that wanted him on the roster because they believe he's too big of a distraction to be a backup quarterback. So this is weirdly enough, probably Shedeur's only shot in the league. Again, it seems like he's been doing well in the practice, maybe cool it off the field a little bit with the speed. But we'll see.
Do you think he can work, Marcus? That's the question that everybody asks. But we saw him in college, I think probably inhibited a little bit because of his offensive line and how many sacks that he took. But he's a smaller quarterback. He hasn't necessarily gone up against Big Ten SEC competition, although there have been teams in the Big 12 that went on to make big runs. Do you think it can work realistically when you factor in the off the field, the Deion Sanders factor, his ability on the field. I just wonder if you believe that this is something that could actually happen and be successful for Shedeur in Cleveland.
I mean, I do, but I think the level of success is what we're going to debate about, right? Because is he going to be a top 5, top 6 quarterback in the league? No, I don't see that. Like, he doesn't have the talent of a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow or Josh Allen. Like, name those guys. But could he be a solid starter in the NFL? You know, in that middle range, maybe be like a Geno Smith type of quarterback? Absolutely. And I think that's the difference. Is a lot of people, when we're talking about him maybe being the 2nd or 3rd overall pick, that felt too rich because he doesn't have those type of traits. But if you're looking for somebody who can be a solid starter, that can help your offense, that doesn't make a lot of mistakes, that is accurate, I think Shedeur can do that. It's just, is a team going to be willing to invest that much time and that many resources into developing a guy they feel like has a limited ceiling? We'll see.
Yeah. No, I think it's a fair question too. And I mean, then you go, okay, let's say they put Gabriel or Shedeur on a practice squad. You know, would they clear the practice squad without bidding claim too? I mean, it's definitely something to keep our eye on. And I think that's what everybody's going to be talking about in terms of what to look at in Cleveland. And here's the other thing I think will benefit them. And it doesn't matter, I think, who's at quarterback. First, you have the upgraded running back room, right? I think that new running back room is going to be just smash mouth football, right? And then there's been reports out of minicamp that they're going to kind of go back to Stefanski's 2 tight end sets. And I think that makes perfect sense when you have guys like Njoku and then rookie Harold Fannin Jr. I think all of that it could potentially be a perfect storm to kind of, I think they're kind of coming out and saying, it doesn't matter who's going to play quarterback. We're going to put somebody in and we're going to build this offensive line, build this offensive design around whoever's playing. And they're just going to go back to that smash mouth football. So I think you're going to see a big year out of guys like David Njoku as well.
Yeah, and think about when this Kevin Stefanski offense worked the best. When we were back in 2020, and it was Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and they were just running the ball 30, 35 times a game. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that kind of split again this year with Quinshon Judkins, who they drafted at 36, Dylan Sampson, who I thought they stole in round 4. Yeah. And then you're right with the 2 tight ends. Harold Fannin was one of my favorite players from Bowling Green, set every tight end record imaginable over the last 2 years. He's kind of like an H-back, a guy that you can move all over the formation, and you just get back to playing under center. It's rollouts, it's play actions, it's easy throws, easy reads. And I actually think that's where Shedeur Sanders works really well. I've always thought he's a really good fit in a Kevin Stefanski offense where you just ask him to make the right read and be accurate. I think he can do that. It's going to be interesting to see if he's ultimately the guy that Stefanski rolls with, or do they go with someone like Flacco, who's got the stronger arm, but certainly has less mobility? We'll see.
Yeah. The one thing that's pretty clear with the Browns QB room, and to your point, Marcus and Nick, I think regardless of what direction they go, is they don't have a guy in there who can chuck the ball down the field with accuracy 60 yards. I don't think that's their offense, though. To your point, the 2 tight end set, Harold Fannin can do everything. I thought he should have won the Mackey last year over Tyler Warren. He can block, and I think he's also good at those little rug routes 5 to 6 yards down the field. And the wide receiver room doesn't necessarily scream deep threat. And I think that's okay. That's what Kevin Stefanski runs. So I think they do have the right skill set quarterback in there. It's a matter of which one do they pick. And to your point, Nick, I don't see a scenario where a quarterback of a rookie status is on the practice squad. And so in that case, it's Flacco or Pickett that have to go. We don't know who the Browns starting quarterback is going to be. We know who the Steelers starting quarterback is going to be, and it's caused a lot of controversy, Marcus, here in our neck of the woods. Aaron Rodgers is officially with Pittsburgh. We've seen, I think, a bit of a calmer side to him in the mediascape, at least, in what he's talked about publicly. He seems like he's just more so focused on football, at least that's what he says, than his personal life. But I want to talk about the football side of things. I pitched last week on the show. And, you know, again, this is somebody who has myself for years, I'll raise my hand. It feels like for years, for months, I've said, look, I don't think Aaron Rodgers can work with Pittsburgh. But he had almost as many touchdowns as Josh Allen. His completion percentage last year was nearly the same. He was 8th in the league in passing yards. He was in the top 10 in passing touchdowns. Is Aaron Rodgers capable of being at least somewhat, in your mind, in the Steelers offense with Arthur Smith, what he was in Green Bay in the 2020-21 seasons when he was winning MVPs?
No, because the mobility is gone. And I think that's the biggest difference in his game. we remember Aaron Rodgers as the guy that could escape pressure, get outside the pocket, and beat defenses down the field. That's no longer his game. And you even saw that starting in the 2022 season with Rodgers. He just didn't want to get hit anymore. He didn't want to take any additional punishment. So he was standing in the pocket, getting rid of the ball quickly, not throwing the ball down the field. And I think that's the biggest reason why the Packers decided to move on after the 2022 season. He goes to the Jets in 2023, tears his Achilles, and then last year starts the season out pretty rough, gets a little bit better as the year goes on. But you watch some of those late season games, especially a game against Buffalo. It was the worst game that I've ever seen Aaron Rodgers play. And that would be the concern for me if I was a Steeler fan, that, hey, it's going to be, maybe fine in September and October, and he can win in the pocket and show off his arm. But when the weather turns, here in November, December, January, is he going to be able to play in the cold? Because a lot of these quarterbacks, they really struggle once that colder weather hits. It's the main reason why Tom Brady wanted to leave New England to go play in Tampa. It's the biggest reason Drew Brees started to fall off at the end of his career. Same for Peyton Manning. You remember those last couple of years in Denver. He just didn't have the arm strength anymore. I would be really worried about the lower body of Aaron Rodgers, because when it gets cold, is he going to have enough juice in those legs to really torque and throw the ball down the field? I've got some major questions.
Well, and they're already tailoring the offense to him too, which is scary, because now you're trying to build around this guy who doesn't have the mobility. Okay, seems to be playing the leadership role again. And, I'd love to get your thoughts on this too, because, you saw, and you're host of the Locked On Cowboys podcast. So I'd love to get your perspective on the move away from Pickens. I think it's a great pickup for the Cowboys, to pair him with CeeDee Lamb. And this was just put out today by Jeremy Fowler at ESPN. He says that one of the big reasons that the Steelers moved on from Pickens was the maturity issues that Pickens has. And does that gel well with Rodgers? Well, they probably wouldn't hit it off, so it became one of the reasons they trade off Pickens. So now you're making roster decisions before you even go out and officially sign the guy, and that's worrisome for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's always going to be a concern when you have Aaron Rodgers. He's going to want his guys in there, right? I mean, the Jets are the perfect example. They went out and got Alan Lazard. That wasn't good enough, so they had to go out and trade for Devontae Adams midseason. They got his offensive coordinator. Rodgers is going to have a say, because he's Aaron Rodgers. He's one of the top 10 quarterbacks of all time.
Sure,
there's some cachet there, but as the fit with Pickens and Rodgers, I mean, I understand there might be some personality conflict. I actually think it's more simple. I think it's just DK Metcalf and George Pickens are too alike in what they do. And I know that there's people listening to this right now thinking, oh, what's so wrong with that? Why not just have two of those guys? It's really hard to build an offense around two vertical threats. You need guys that can come in and run every route, that can play in the slot, that can play as the Z receiver. And that's just not DK Metcalf, and it's not George Pickens.
Yeah,
I've got to assume that the Steelers are going to use some of that draft capital that they got for George Pickens to go out and try to get another receiver, whether that's, you name the guy, Brandon Ayuk. Maybe they try to explore that. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, maybe if he pops back up in some of these trade talks. I don't think their current receiver room of DK Metcalf, Calvin Austin, and Robin Wilson is what they're going to have to open week one.
No.
You made a good point, too, in a tweet that I saw earlier today about, as across the NFL, the receiving depth and talent is really poor. I actually would make the argument they made the Pickens trade if you exclude the off-the-field issues, because they believe Roman Wilson can be a stud, because they have had success in drafting receivers in later rounds. But that's the offense. So I want to pivot to this, Marcus, before we get to my question with the Bills. The other question I think surrounding Pittsburgh is this, and Nick and I are on opposite ends of the spectrum here. I think he wants a re-sign, I want a trade. What to do with TJ Watt? Clearly, I think he is worth the money. We don't dispute that. There's no question that he's worth whatever he's worth, whether that's 43, 44, some are predicting as much as $48 million for TJ Watt in a 3 or 4 year deal. But given where the Steelers are at, is it profitable to re-sign him? Would you trade him? If you are Omar Khan, what decision are you making?
This is a really good question, because I think it depends on what you believe the timeline of this team is. Do you think the Steelers could be legitimate Super Bowl contenders over the next 2 or 3 years? If the answer is yes, you keep TJ Watt because he's your best defensive player. And you think, hey, maybe he falls off at age 33, 34. We don't care. He gives us the best chance of winning right now. But I also know a lot of, long-term Steeler fans or longtime Steeler fans that know, hey, this team isn't ready. And as long as Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes are in this conference, and if we don't have one of those guys, we've got no chance.
Yeah.
So why not trade Watt right now while he's at the peak of his value before he starts to decline? We see across the league, like once these edge rushers start to get to be 31, 32 years old, that's when we see a big decline in their production. And it's not like TJ Watt's been the healthiest pass rusher throughout his career. Trade him for whatever you can get. Maybe it's a late first round pick. Maybe it's a second round pick. Save that money and reinvest it in your offense. Try to go out and draft your quarterback next year with the stockpile of draft picks that you have. I probably would be more in that direction because nothing matters until you get your franchise quarterback. Yeah. And we've seen this now for the Steelers over the last 10 years. The only thing that's going to matter is can they get that franchise quarterback? And if trading Watt helps you go out and get him, I think you do it.
Yeah. And I think where you see that come through too is, what we want, right? Are you going to try and go for it? Or are you trying to rebuild? I think Tomlin is telling us exactly what he wants to do. I think by going out and getting a guy like Aaron Rodgers, they think that they're going to go all in. They feel like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We have the aging defense. Cam Hayward is still going to be around. You've locked up that secondary. You go get a guy like Darius Slay, who's not, who he used to be, but he's great to pair up with Joey Porter Jr. So I would be surprised if they don't get this done because I think everything they've done so far is exactly what you said. They're trying to make a run at the Super Bowl. Everything else you just said is, I agree. I don't think they have enough talent to do it, but
you can't have two timelines, and that's kind of what it feels like Pittsburgh is trying to do right now.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, when you do that, you end up being successful doing either of them, and that's where Pittsburgh's been the last 4 or 5 years, stuck in this 10-7, 9-8 loop where they're not good enough to make it deep into the playoffs, but they're not bad enough yet to get that pick to really get them over the hump. I wouldn't be surprised if signing TJ Watt to a $40 million a year deal for the next 5 years continues to put them into that loop.
Oh my gosh! And the longer they wait, it's going to get worse. You have Hendrickson coming up. You have Micah Parsons coming up.
Yep.
I mean, it's only going to get more expensive the longer they wait.
And the craziest thing, too, I think, from my perspective, is Pittsburgh's an old team, clearly, but I do think you have some youth still on defense that you can use, right? You just drafted Derek Harmon for your defensive tackle that is going to be Cameron Hayward's replacement. Nick Herbig, before he was hurt, had looks and flashes and whatnot. Patrick Queen is still the guy that you believe he can be, and he's still young and in his 20s. I think Peyton Wilson can be somebody who flies under the radar, and those are just a few names, right? Alex Highsmith is still in decent shape, I believe. Really, it's your secondary minus Joey Porter and Beanie Bishop, who are the old guys. I just think it'll be interesting. But remember, to me, and I look at this and I think for Pittsburgh, they lead the league, I believe, or at least close to leading the league in defensive spending. And if you want to win and beat teams like Baltimore and Cincinnati, even in your own division, you have to score points. And so if Aaron Rodgers can't help you with that, signing TJ Watt's not going to really help you either. So that's Pittsburgh's situation. And I think I want to end with this, Marcus, with Buffalo, because I'm not really sure what question we ask other than the fact that is this their year? So I guess I'll leave the floor to you, Marcus, when I say, we talked all about at the end of last season when the game AFC Championship game ended, and we asked the question, what's the hole? Is it a mental hurdle? Is it on the defensive line? Is it more in the wide receiver game? What is the one hole post-minicamp as we get ready for training camp that the Bills need to fill to finally get them over the hump and get to the Super Bowl?
I mean, I think the easy answer would be receiver, right? Because they don't have that bona fide big play receiver. They don't have a Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase or CeeDee Lamb. I can go on and on.
I guess my question would be, do they need one with Josh Allen at quarterback?
I think they just need more consistent receiver play. I think that was the biggest issue last year because they got good play from Khalil Shakir. Mac Hollins made some big plays, but it would be really nice on 3rd and 7 not to ask Josh Allen to be Superman on every single big play of the game. But that's actually not my biggest concern about this team because I think roster-wise, this is the best roster that Buffalo has had since they drafted Josh Allen. Like, I think this is their time to go out and win. My concern is the coaching. I just don't think the coaching is comparable when you look at some of the other elite AFC teams. I think Andy Reid and John Harbaugh and Jim Harbaugh are significantly better. I think Sean Payton's team in Denver is going to be a lot better. This Bills defense, and when you have a defensive-minded head coach, you would expect that to be the strength of your team. More often than not, it's the defense that has let Buffalo down, whether it was the 13-second game or last year. You know, they had some really bad games against big-time offenses, whether it was the Rams where they gave up 50 points, the Lions game where they gave up 48 points, and then obviously the Chiefs, who were slumping all year on offense, they scored 30 points in the AFC Championship game. I just don't trust this coaching staff and the defensive coaching staff to give them an edge on that side of the ball. And I think that's going to be, once again, Buffalo's Achilles heel going into the playoffs.
Nick, I talked to you about this in earlier episodes, and I think you make a great point, Marcus, with the defense. I'll be more specific because I've talked about the defensive line specifically. I covered the Bills last year for the TV station that I work for, and I watched early in the season Greg Rousseau and AJ Epinesa single-handedly wreck 4 straight teams. And then we saw them get to the end of regular season and in the playoffs, and they could not get home with 4. And then what Nick and I had talked about ad nauseum, right, Nick, is that if you're going to want to beat Mahomes, you cannot afford to send 6, 7 guys every single play. You have to get home with the front 4. I think the Joey Bosa signing can help, but my big question for the Bills is going to be, they have plenty of guys up there who are capable. I think their front 4 on paper is top 3 in the NFL. Especially now with Epinesa being a reserve, with Bosa taking that defensive end spot. My biggest question is, can they get home with the guys that are on the defensive line? Because they just simply do not have the back end. They have the linebackers. I just don't think they have the back end to be able to hold up in man-to-man coverage when you get into the playoffs.
Yeah, and they were hoping that Von Miller would be that guy that would come into the postseason and make 2 or 3 big plays. It never really happened. I mean, he had one nice play against the Ravens last year, but that's about it. I mean, he was pretty quiet the entire time that he was with the Bills. We'll see if Joey Bosa can stay healthy. He's already banged up. I have my doubts that he'll make it through the season.
Me too.
But they're relying on a lot of young players. You mentioned Gregory Rousseau. He just got a contract extension. He's still incredibly young. They drafted Landon Jackson on day 2 of the draft this year. He's a guy that I think has the potential to be one of those game wreckers. But you're right. The only way that they're going to beat the Chiefs and even the Ravens, and I know they beat the Ravens last year, but you've got to figure out a way to disrupt the quarterback without having to blitz. They've got the talent, but will they be able to do it in the biggest moments of the game? We'll see.
No, I think it's a fair point. And I mean, Bosa, I think I could actually see Bosa. He may be listed as the starter. I could see him playing more of that Von Miller role, though, that pass rusher role, and switching in and out with AJ Epinesa. And I think the other guy, I've been a fan of him since they drafted him, is Ed Oliver. You know, I think he is just a guy that's going to take up space. But if you can get him to take that next step, and I get it, where he's going into year 7, I think, or something like that. You know, you hope to have a breakout before then. But I think if he can,
but defensive tackles take a while. Like,
sure,
they're historically, take a look at Cam Hayward. You know, maybe
100%.
Pittsburgh's best player.
Yep.
Really didn't do anything in the first 4 years of his contract, and now at age 36, maybe had the best year of his career.
Yeah. So I like the additions to the offensive line. I agree. And you saw that in the Super Bowl. Philly was able to rush for and get that pressure. You're going to need that to take that next step. And I don't want to sleep on the Tre'Davious White thing either. I think that's a sneaky signing. I know he's maybe lost, I was going to say a step, let's say 5. But I think to have him kind of rotate in, I know Maxwell got injured as well. Seems like he'll be okay for training camp. But I think they've made some good upgrades on the defensive secondary that will help out, you know, to face off against guys like Mahomes.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see if Cole Bishop, who they drafted in the 2nd round last year, if he's able to crack the starting lineup with DeMar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp. They're going to need his athleticism because Hamlin and Rapp are one of the slowest safety pairings in the league. Keep an eye on Cole Bishop throughout the season.
And the biggest positive for Buffalo is if all that can happen, remember, Matt Milano is expected to be fully healthy again. And if it is Matt Milano that we are used to seeing, that's a guy who can guard the likes of the Travis Kelce's of the world because he is a good pass defender in the middle of the defense. Well, Marcus Mosher, it's been great having you on, my friend. I know you got a lot of stuff going on and a lot of great content out there, but we loved having you on. Would love to have you back on again as we get ready for the season. But this is the downtime, right? The vacation time before we get into chaos in July.
Kind of. I mean, I host a fantasy football podcast. This is like peak fantasy season, right? Everybody's already started to get ready for their draft. So my poor wife, she never gets a break with football season. It's 12 months out of the year.
Well, we will be using you for fantasy football consulting firms here at the Gem City Sports Podcast Network as well. So anybody who needs that or just wants to read his great content, you can follow him at Marcus_Mosher. Man, it's great to see you. Great to meet you. And can't wait to talk to you soon.
Of course, anytime.
All right, Marcus Mosher of Locked On and, of course, writes for the 33rd Team Football. Really great stuff, Nick. I think so many question marks as we've talked about, and I don't know if they're going to get answered until we get past training camp because I think these are all question marks that have to happen in season, right? It's really one of the first seasons, maybe minus Cleveland's quarterback battle, that it's not position battles or who's going to make the roster for these three teams. It's more so of how do you perform. Not even in the beginning of the season. I'm more worried about November and December.
Oh, and I was going to say, I don't even think that we're going to have answers in training camp. I don't think we're going to have answers to the end of the season. Maybe midway through the season when we really start to see what these teams look like. Marcus mentioned the coaching in Buffalo. If I see heads rolling in Buffalo if the Bills do not win the Super Bowl this year, and that's crazy because that's a lot of pressure for a team to come in. I think that coaching staff, could be in for a new look there too. So there's a lot of pressure there, a lot of pressure in Pittsburgh with the Aaron Rodgers signing. Is Tomlin going to stay above 500? What do you do with TJ Watt? And then Cleveland, there's just pressure to find a quarterback, to find a team at this point. So it's you said it's the downtime, it's the off season, it's the vacation season for the NFL, but man, there's a lot of worry brewing right now.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, this might be a bold take that I'll start hammering on a little bit later in the summer, but I think Sean McDermott's a lot closer to Mike Tomlin's job security than he is with any other coach.
I've said that before too, and
I'm not sure that Buffalo's in the mood to get rid of him. And I got to tell you what, it's catch-22, right? Buffalo's in a better position than Pittsburgh, but similar.
Sure.
Are you okay with being in the Final Four of the AFC Championship game every single year until you get over the hump? So we'll see. It's going to be very interesting, but great stuff today. Thanks to Roger Castillo and Marcus Mosher. We're back Monday, back to the Sports Talk. Save and I Talk. We've got our Save and I game, which is coming on. Jeff Goodwill, Mark Sobolewski going to join us on Monday. Paul out.